This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Things We Carry. My name is Varshini, and as always, a huge thank you to Sauce for Cause and Bharat FM for making this possible. Today I have Rajiv Satyal here with me. Thank you so much for making the time. You're a new parent, so I know you're very busy, but a little bit of background about Rajiv. He had a really unusual entry into comedy, doing his stand-up act for then world #1 tennis player Pete Sampras in a locker room. Rajiv is also the only person to perform stand-up comedy on all 7 continents, which is wild. And he's also opened for Russell Peters more than any other Indian comedian out there. A lot of his content has been featured in Amazon, NBC, NPR, Nickelodeon, Netflix, GQ, and so many more insanely large publications. I'm so excited to have you here today. And the one thing I did leave out is the story of how you proposed to your then girlfriend, now wife, which I think is hilarious. So I'd love for you to go into that at some point during this interview. But really, really excited to have you here today because I think to see like a South Asian Indian comedian is so rare. We're just getting a couple more on the scene. So to have you like paving the way for so many years is going to be a really interesting conversation to have. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me, Varshini. It's great to be with you.
Oh my gosh, great. So first I'd like to ask you, what is the origin story of you and your family in this country? Because we love to unpack like how you started here and the things that we take with us as, you know, we pass them on to future generations and some of the patterns that we have that we're like, you know what, this is not serving us. This is not something I want to continue. So I want to like go back to your family and the origin story in this country.
If I had an unusual entry into stand-up, then the Satyals had an unusual entry into the United States, because the reason we're having this conversation at all, Varshini, is my mom and I think our parents are connected, the whole Browntown kind of aspect of things. My mom was the first one to come here. So my mom came first and then brought my dad, which is very rare, even now.
Girl boss, literally.
Girl boss, dude, you know, girl power, represent, dude. She totally did it. So her sister, my Masi, Ushi, we call her Ushi, but Usha Pali, came over, I think it was a few months before my mom did. Then my mom, Lalita Satyal, Lalita Bali at the time, came with her. And they were sponsored by their brother. So there were several siblings. He was a sponsor of it. My mom came over. She was already in love with my dad. This was a no-no because, you know, arranged marriages, the whole thing. I don't have to explain that to you. You get it. And she flew back to India to marry Vinay Satyal and brought him over. So that's how the Satyals got started in this country.
Oh my God, amazing. So you have been like born and raised here then?
Yeah, I was born in Ohio in 1976. So way back. What do they say? I'm from the 70s. You're from the 70s and I'm a 90s bitch. So I was born in the 70s, even though I represent, I rock the 90s pretty hard. But you know what? It's
oh my God,
yeah,
great reference. Also, by the way, very niche like pop radio reference, which I really appreciate. So that's awesome. So growing up here, what was it like? So growing up, especially in Ohio, was there a big like South Asian population there, or were you like one of few? What was the landscape like at that time?
In the broader community, yes. So, you know, you have like greater Cincinnati. So for not everybody will know exactly where Cincinnati is, and Dayton and those places, southwest corner of Ohio, very Midwest, the heart of it all of that stuff. So in my high school, there were 500 kids in a grade, and it was Sheila Mehra and I think we were the only 2 Indian kids there in the whole class of 500. I believe that is correct. We were scattered like every now and then. I think the person ahead of me, there was a Sejal Javeri. Above her was a Sonu Gupta, I want to say. Gosh, I should tell my mom. My parents are going to watch this. Like, you don't know who they are? I'm like, yeah, it was only a few streets away. And then there were some Yiti Rajas who lived there. There was a Mehta who lived there. But as you can tell, I'm struggling to find the number of people in a larger community. But when you went out to greater Cincinnati, this is in Fairfield, so 25 minutes north of the city. If you included the greater area, then it felt like there were lots of Indians. It wasn't like, oh, I'm the only one in Ohio. Like, Dave
Okay.
Chappelle probably. I think that's what people assume with Dave Chappelle. Oh, he's the only black guy in Ohio. It's like, that's
Yeah.
totally not true. But I think according
Yeah.
to his comedy and the way that he plays it up, it's like he's some black guy in a farm in Ohio. It's like, no, there are people of color in Ohio. We do exist.
Okay, you're like, yeah, I'm literally an example of that. So
Yeah.
when you were growing up, like you have all these just like handful of people who are South Asian. Were you all like close? Because I went to school in Texas for like 2 years in like 2007 to 2009, and that was tough. Let me tell you, no shade to Texas, but that was not easy. And the South Asian kids, you fell into one of two camps. You either gravitated towards them or you're like, I have nothing to do with you losers. Like I am not one of you. So what was that like for you growing up?
It was actually quite painful. It's funny that you break it down like that. My wife is from Texas, so she's
Okay.
from a town. Like when we follow politics and they talk about urban and rural and they talk about the suburbs and the exurbs. And like, what are exurbs? Well, exurbs are towns. They are places that really aren't a suburb of where Fairfield is a suburb of Cincinnati. Once you get, I think, more than an hour outside of a city or something like that, they define it by the number of people per square mile and the radius and all that. But it was like, wow, when we went to visit her town, LaGrange, which is halfway between Houston and Austin, AKA, I mean, you're just in the middle of East Texas. And I'm like, this is a town. There's the court, the courtyard. The town square. There's the courthouse. There's the post office. There's the place that bakes kolaches and muffins. And when they run out around 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon, they're done for the day. Like, that's not a suburban life. That's town life. You don't go to Panera Bread. They're like, oh, we're done. No, bitch, you're not done. It's not 9 o'clock yet. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, keep baking. Like, what? I'm going to call someone at corporate, bake my bread, my soup. Like, there's no one to call it corporate. It's someone who came over from Germany or Czechoslovakia and they opened up a bakery. And I'm like,
Panera is not sponsoring this, by the way. They will never sponsor us after we drag their name through the mud just now. We're never going to.
By the way, I didn't drag them to the rug. I'm just like, if they ran out, which I don't think they're allowed to. So no, I rep Panera hard. My mom is a big Panera Bread fan.
Okay,
so
yeah.
There not a lot of places vegetarians can eat, even still in Ohio. So Panera's one of them.
Makes sense. So you're saying that like, so it was like either close or not close, like with the other South Asian kids?
So in answering your question, I ended up talking about Panera Bread. So a little scattered. Dad brain. This is what parental brain, I guess, does for you. Not quite there. So it was pretty painful in the sense of I liked everybody. And so I always wanted to be part of anyone, just like any group of just get to know whoever was there. But I was one of those rare brown kids who did pretty well in a white environment. I was fine. Like I kind of couldn't wait to leave Priya and Jayshree and get back to John and Matt and Mike and Jeff and play basketball and video games and just hang out with my real friends because I was forced into it, right? It was like, you have to perform at Diwali, you have to perform at Holi, and you have to do the dances, and you should sing a song, and I cannot sing. And I'm like, I don't want to do the dances, and I don't want to do any of that stuff. So I ended up emceeing, which is how I really got my start, is I started emceeing at the age of like 13, 14 in front of 1,000 people at a mela. And if you could do that, that's a thing. That's no joke, or I guess some jokes. But I did not feel any camaraderie with Indians that I did not know. I felt like they didn't really like me, get me. I didn't really want to dance. I wasn't into Jodeci. I was like, who is that? What is that? Like I was listening to rock music, and I mean, now I'm like a massive hip hop and pop fan, as you can pick up from my dated references. But I really did not mesh into that community, and so it was really funny in college when I finally got to know a lot of South Asians, a lot of Indian people. It was very awkward for me at first, but I think within 1 or 2 weeks, I was like fully immersed in the culture, and I just needed some vodka to dance that bhangra, I think.
Okay, my first college party, they were mixing vodka into mango lassi. Like they bought like so many tubs of it. And I was like, no, like this tastes so bad. I was like, I know what we're trying to do, but I think we should just like not do that thing. So, so you get to college.
That's funny.
And I think also I realized that, where your parents plant you when you're growing up, you just have to make friends by chance. And then when you get to college in the real world, it's a little bit more by choice, which is a lot better. So when do you feel like you first started accessing and like bringing maybe your like Indian side, South Asian side into your comedy? Because like your I Am Indian video is like massive. Like it's been shared by some of the biggest celebrities in Bollywood and in Hollywood. So like when did you start tapping into that side and like bringing it into the fold?
This has really been a journey of my becoming more and more South Asian. And, you get people like Mindy Kaling, people like Aziz Ansari have caught a lot of flack, honestly, about like, oh, they're not brown enough, or they don't talk about being brown, or now they're talking about it because it's cool and they're leaning into it. It's like, you got to give people a chance to embrace their own journey, because they might not lead with that. And I totally understand that. Like, I've been immersed in the Desi community, the South Asian community, from a performance standpoint for a long time. So from that standpoint, Mindy and Aziz have not done as much immersion into the South Asian community broadly. That's a different topic. But as far as artistically, that is up to every individual artist to decide, or let the muses come to you when they come. So when I did my stand-up for Pete Sampras in a locker room, I did no Indian jokes. And for the first 2 years I didn't, because I was mostly performing for white audiences. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm running away from the Indian stuff. That's just not that wasn't my inner monologue. Like, I was into just like everyday kind of jokes, some political stuff. Actually, the early formations, like the very first set I ever did, is on YouTube. My dad recorded it. So, shout out to my dad for recording the set. It's there. You go to my website and you can find it on YouTube. And the early formation of, I'm already kind of there. You kind of going, oh yeah, that is kind of the comedy you do. But I did not do a lot of Indian stuff. And now it probably ends up being about a third of my act. And because that's probably about right. I probably am like a third definition of it, because like, I'm American, I'm short, I'm a lot of other things. I'm nerdy. I'm into politics. I'm into, whatever. So I don't just think, oh, I'm Indian all day long. That's not like my inner monologue.
Yeah. And I that's such a good point, because I think sometimes we feel like ownership over like South Asian people who like come to the forefront. You're like, hey, you should be representing me. But it's like, okay, listen, I asked to do comedy. I didn't ask to be someone's role model. Miley Cyrus said that. And I was like, you know what, Miley, when she did I Can't Be Tamed, or whatever that music video was, I was like, I kind of respect that. And I was like 12. But I think it's the same thing for comedians and actors of color. Like, we put a lot of pressure on them, instead of being like, who else is trying to like fill the space that you want them to fill? Like, why don't we give them a chance too, instead of like being like, this one person has to be everything to everyone, which is definitely an unfair onus. And like, speaking of your parents, how were they through this entire journey? Because I also asked that question with the realization that I have parents who are very supportive of like things that I do, could not care less that I didn't go into like DEL, doctor, engineer, lawyer type stuff. So I'm just like curious from an outside perspective how they played into your journey.
So your parents did not care? Like, they were okay with your going
into
whatever?
Yeah. Oh, I was like failing these math classes in high school, and they're like, you know what? You'll figure it out. Like, you'll be fine. Like, something will work out.
That's so funny. I fortunately have very supportive parents. And I think that they, in many ways, are, the typical uncle and auntie, but in many ways are not. And in so many ways are not. And that's just not the way that I saw them. Was, when I hear the experiences that most of my brown friends have had, including my wife's, I'm like, wow, my parents are very different from that. So they wanted us to marry Indians. They wanted us to be doctors. That was sort of the default, of course. But I think when they realized that wasn't in the cards, the thing is, I was good at math. I was good at science, and all that stuff. I suffered from analysis paralysis. It was like, what do I go do? And it was very hard for me to narrow something down. I'm reading Cal Penn's book right now, and he talks about how he applied to 16 colleges. And it's like, I applied to, I think 19, I set the school record, and that's not a record you want to set. That's not good. And I think I just associate higher numbers. That's great, right? Like, I just shouldn't play golf or something, but it's just like, no, you should focus. You should apply to 6 schools, 2 dream schools, 2 that you would go to, and 2 safety schools, and be done with it. But I was like, I don't know, maybe I will go to Ithaca. Maybe I will go to the Simon Rock College of Bard. That looks like a cool place. Like, I just couldn't focus because so many things seemed interesting to me. Like I was saying, I like to be liked by people, and I like people. And so I didn't want to rule anyone out or rule anything out. And that sort of, and even with my comedy, like, I haven't picked a thing. Like, a lot of the people who became very big, like, picked a thing, and they really amplified it. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to go up and talk about what I want to talk about. It's like, okay, well, that's a longer road then. Like, if you're going to be clean, I say bitch, evidently. I've already said it 3 times in this interview. I don't really say that very often. I don't know why I'm like compelled to say that word today. It's a little bit rare. And that, But then also it's kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like I want to bring myself wholly to the stage or to the screen.
Yeah.
And, all right, well, that's just going to take longer, but to me, it's more fun.
But it's such a fulfilling career, I feel like, because you get to be a 360 person instead of just like a thing that people go to you for very one specific reason. And I think you build a career that kind of like transcends like categories. I do that like with my work because I mean, surprise, if anyone didn't know, this is not what I do full time. But in my job, like I work with creators and talent, they're always like, Varshini, like, should I just post like one type of piece of content? And I'm like, the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is like have people follow you for you, like as a person, because you're honest and you're talking from like a place of like lived experience rather than like, here's what I bought on Amazon today. Like that is there. And there's like a point of virality for that, but it's not like a career building thing. And when you were like coming up in the comedy space, who were kind of like your peers and people that you leaned on for like advice or mentorship, things like that?
Hassan Minhaj is my old roommate, and we lived together for a couple of years in Studio City, and we're still in touch. He's great. He's been super supportive. He's done my show that I have out now, the talk show and everything. And, he made this remark once to me. He just goes, a lot of headliners. I go, do I? He goes, yeah. It's just like, you're always, either performing with or talking to, or you have on your podcast, like, Sebastian Maniscalco, Russell Peters, Kevin Nealon, Chris D'Elia. I mean, all these people, Eliza Schlesinger, like you met her before she became like all these people that you know. And he goes, I go, doesn't everybody? He goes, no, not really. He goes, that's a pretty like Joe Coy and all these people who like later went on to do all these things. And so I think of those people, as people I looked up to for sure. And then coming up, it's, they say there's a class of those people that you sort of come up with. And yes and no. I think that's if you're like in an improv troupe or a sketch group or whatever, if you're hitting mics together for a very long time and all of that on the come up. But stand up is such an individual pursuit that it's hard to say that. Like the people like Fahim Anwar and KT Tatara and all the other people that I think are super funny. Yeah, I mean, we sort of came up together, I guess you can kind of say that. But it's such a solo pursuit that it's hard to think of it that way sometimes.
And you're literally like just bearing your soul on stage constantly. You're like, I hope people accept this. I hope people like this when I say this. And that is also, you have to build up kind of like a really thick skin for that. Like, did you ever have shows where maybe you like bombed or you're like, oh, this did not go well? And what were those like inner dialogue moments like?
Yeah, I've written extensively about this because I bombed so much. No, that's not what I meant. But like, I mean, bombing is something that people really obviously are interested in because failure is funny. I mean, success is boring. Ask people like, how are you successful? Like, I could give you all the tips and tricks. And I mean, I can give you some and I think that they are helpful. But it is funny to hear people, when in March of 2015 and I was engaged to Harsha, but my dad and I went over to India. I was doing a bunch of shows there. And honestly, man, I went in the toilet. Like, I mean, 3 in a row. I just didn't have it. And I remember one particular show and I just now figured out what it was. This is 6 years later. And, it was like, it was in a kind of a jazz club. It was a perfect setting, low ceiling, great lighting, amazing sound, packed. The 3 or 4 comics who went up before me, all killed. And I'm headlining and I'm supposed to do like 25, 30 minutes. And it was a little bit of a short headlining set, but still I had to do a substantial amount. This is in Bangalore, which is one of my favorite places in the world. And I think after 9 minutes, I made the comment that was like, all right, guys, that's all the jokes there are. Like I've done clean jokes, semi-dirty jokes, college jokes. I've done crowd work. I've done political stuff. I've done talking about visiting India. Like I'm out. Like that's it. And that got a little bit of a chuckle, but it was funny. No. Like it really hurt. Yeah. And what's amazing is how quickly that deceleration happens. Like it's like lifting weights. It's very much like that. When you're like, oh, I'm totally getting to 20 and you're like 15, 16, okay, 16. And you're like, wait a second, I was going to get 20. And like it just exponentially, your muscles just fail. Yeah. And it's like that. You just go from, oh my gosh, like, I got some good material here. Like I'm ready to do this to, oh my gosh, I suck. Should I quit? Why was I even born? Like it's just like it's just like
the spiral. Just sometimes you gotta cut it off. You gotta be like, okay, this is the subject of the spiral today. These are the only agenda items we will cover. That's it. We're not questioning my existence on Earth. We're just this one experience.
It was just like, man, I mean, it's just, you just are lifting this weight and you got it and then you don't.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. Things are true until they're not. And that's, you're hilarious until you're not. And you find that out really quickly. So what it was 6 years later, it was, look, man, looking back, because I tend to look at what did I do wrong first, which I think is a good way to approach anything. I think any
Yes.
miscommunication, anything that happens, you should look to yourself and go, what could I have done better? What energy was I carrying? Did I screw this up? Did I kind of like make assumptions? All those things that you should do. And then you can totally find out like, well, what did the other person do wrong? What was the situation? And so I think that I looked at it now and I go, that was 3 or 4 comics homegrown in India doing very specific local references and all the stuff that's always going to kill, whether you're in Cincinnati or Bangalore or Boston or Latvia. If you're of that earth, you're going to do those jokes better. And then you got this American voice guy coming in and doing all this stuff. It's like they've now been acclimated so much to like an Indian kind of dialogue. And again, it's not specific to Indians. It could be Irish, it could be Israeli, it doesn't matter. At that point, it's like to come in and do such an American set, and I have such a global perspective. That was probably, that played into it a lot. And and I've learned to use the phrase "all the difference" now recently. It's like it's made a difference. It's like, no, that made all the difference. It's not that it just made a difference; it made all the difference.
It was like the key thing when they've been so acclimated to one thing, and then for your brain to be like, oh, like, okay, I have to like open up to something else entirely. Like you get in that comfort zone, and then you have to like try like a new flavor. It's like, okay, whoa, wait, I like don't know how I feel about this. That's hard.
Totally.
It's definitely working against you.
It is. And so, and there are nights where you just don't have it. Like you just, Steve Martin wrote a book called Born Standing Up. And one important point he makes for anyone who wants to try stand-up is, or really anything, is your best night gets better, but your worst night gets better.
Oh, wow.
Your ceiling goes up, but your floor also goes up. Because anybody can be great on one night. Anybody can crush one night somewhere. He's like, it's about being consistently good. And you're getting a paycheck for this, and you're not feeling it. And maybe you have a headache, and maybe your sun was up, or maybe you're hungover, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You're getting paid to do a job now. We all have those days at work. They're called Monday. And it's like, you don't just go, well, I guess I won't do my job today. It's like, no, man, you get going. You just, you pull it together. And so you got to be able to summon your talent at will and just be funny on the spot like that. And that's the hardest thing in the world. I don't think that there's a skill that is harder than making a room full of people laugh when you don't feel funny or you don't feel like it. And you just got to do it.
Life happens, and it's like life is happening, and you're like, I have to see beyond whatever's going on in my personal circumstances and be like, welcome to Disneyland. Like, here, I'm going to take you through the entire theme park today. And it's like, I'm dying inside. Like, I'm not doing well. That is the hardest thing. And side note, I listened to this one NPR podcast one time that said service industry workers are actually some of the most depressed people, because every single day, regardless of how they feel, they have to be so pleasant and cheery. And that like disconnect between what you're presenting and how you're feeling takes such a huge toll over time, which is difficult. So now you, like, as a comedian, as like someone who's so publicly out there, you're doing a massive interview tomorrow. And also as a new parent, like, how are you recharging? Like, how are you just handling everything?
Meditation for sure is something that has become in vogue, but of course our people know it and invented it. So it is a real thing. I mean, being able to just, even for 30 seconds, everybody has 30 seconds. It doesn't matter how busy you are. You could be the president, you could be whatever. It's like everybody, Simone Biles has 30 seconds. Everybody has 30 seconds. And it's like just taking that, because people are like, oh, I got to sit down for an hour. It's like, yeah, if you can, that's great. But I mean, I meditate for 20 minutes every morning without fail, 6 years in a row, like haven't missed a day. And if it's not in the morning, then it's the afternoon or the night, but it's almost always in the morning, and I get it in. It's, but I did make this connection the other day, which was, a lot of the time when you're meditating, we do this thing where you start running your to-do list. You start thinking about your, some other project or what you're going to, all these other things, right? That just, and I had the realization, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to say this, but it was like, this can start doing you harm, actually, because if your brain isn't turning off, but you think it is, and to your point about the disconnect with the service industry, like, no, but I meditated. It's like, yeah, but you kind of didn't. You sort of like ran your to-do list and worked on your set list for that night. Or no, you're supposed to just, let the thoughts come in and out and pass like clouds in the sky and focus on your breathing or your mantra or whatever it is. And I think that's good. I take a lot of pleasure in the simple things in life. And that's not forced. That just always has been. I didn't realize everybody else wasn't. Like, you mean this cup of chai that I'm having right now isn't the greatest thing of all time? Like, yeah, I just get so up for it. Like, I know after this, I'm actually going to make some chai, and I'm so pumped just to be able to do that. Like, I love smelling the leaves. I love adding the sugar, and I love stirring it. And I mean, it's just, I think I'm someone who just really, really enjoys things and enjoys people. And that helps. I get energized through people. I'm an extrovert. But I mean, COVID, it's like I was able to stay in and be quiet, and that's fine. I don't need anything. I got that from my mom. I think she doesn't need a lot to be happy on a daily basis. And I observed her, and she could just sit there and be happy. And I'm like, well, that's happiness. Like, that's not joy. That's well-being.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And I also only recently realized that people didn't just get so insanely excited by like buying a bottle of shampoo and then be like, oh my God, tomorrow I get to try my new shampoo. Like, I've been that way since I was a kid, just like so like slapstick happy about like the most insane, inane things. Like Trader Joe's will have like a new spread, and I'm like, I cannot wait to go home and try this spread and like blah, 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 whatever. So I think, like, I'm sure if I asked you this, like, is there anything else you'd rather be doing? It sounds like you're the type of person who's like, no, like literally this, like, this is what I would do. Or is that
I was built to do this. Yeah. I think I asked somebody this on my show recently. How did you know you were good? And, when did you know that, and all those sorts of things? And she said, I know I'm in the right field. I'm like, oh, that's a good way of putting it. Like, you don't know 100% yet that you're like, you're not on top of the world yet, but you're in the right field. You're doing the right thing. And I was built to be a speaker. I was built to be a comedian. I was built to be someone who performs on stage, a writer, a host. I think I think I would not have been happy being an engineer. I liked it. I liked being a marketer. I liked those jobs a lot, but I don't think I would have been fulfilled long-term doing that forever.
Sorry. I think I just had like a weird issue with my camera for a second, but
yeah, you're all yellow.
Continuing, but I think that's really special because someone recently asked me, they were like, what would you rather be doing? And I was like, I didn't know that people live their entire lives like wishing they were doing something completely different. Like, that is a sad way to live. And the fact that you feel like I was born to do this, I think is also really clear from the way you talked about applying to colleges, where you were like, oh, actually, you should only be applying to 6 because there aren't like a ton of options for you. There are just like the right options for you and for your life. And those are the things that you should be following. And if you were like honest with yourself about it, you'd know exactly what they are. So the fact that you're like content, that's honestly, it's really awesome to hear. And I think I've gotten the chance to speak to a lot of guests, but the fact that you're so honest about the fact that, okay, I'm back now. Here we go.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're so honest about like, this is how I was raised. I make no apologies for that. This is when I was ready to access my South Asian side and bring it into my work. I think for you to take that at your exact pace when you were ready to do it is so cool. And I'm just learning a lot from that, honestly. I think that's amazing.
Thanks.
I'm
glad that makes me happy to hear.
Yeah. And now like thinking about like, you have been so seasoned in your career over the last like 20 plus years. Now you're seeing this entirely new generation of comedians come up, South Asian or not. Like, what are you excited about in comedy, seeing this like entirely new set of voices come up?
It's going to be very interesting to watch people navigate the new rules, the new lines, and what you, I don't want to say can and cannot say, but it's tougher now in the sense of like, it does get in your inner monologue of anything that you do say, and you're going, oh, I wonder who will be offended by that and whatever else. And that's where I go with it, because I watch people's comedy live or on screen, whatever, and it's still funny to me. I mean, I still laugh. I'm an easy laugh too. Most comedians don't laugh very easily. I'm a very easy laugh, and so because I want to laugh. Like I don't watch a special going, oh, I hope this sucks. Like, I mean, why would I hope it sucks? Like, I want to laugh. Like, I hope it's good. That's a weird thing to hope that it sucks, but I think it's to me, you're seeing such a diversity in experience. You're not just seeing the cisgendered white male point of view. And that doesn't necessarily mean that these new people coming up are, and of course, there's cisgendered straight white males still doing comedy, of course, every day. And that's great. I don't think it necessarily means that they will be funnier or less funny. But I do think that at the end of the day, our job is the simplest in the world. It's not the easiest. I said it's really hard, but it's very simple. And there are very few jobs that you can sum up in 3 words, which are make people laugh.
Oh my God,
it's very hard to sum up jobs like that, where it's just like, I guess you say president govern the country, but that's very nebulous, right? What does that mean exactly? Like, make people laugh is something everybody gets. And if you also want to make a point, if you also want to tell a story, if you also, that's fine. Those are all alsos. But ultimately, every 12 seconds, people have to be laughing. It's like every 10 to 12 seconds, people need a chortle or a chuckle. Yeah, it's 6 laughs a minute. That's what they tell you.
What? Okay, wow. And you're at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, you said, right? And like, where did you learn that rule? Now I'm like so fascinated.
It's a rule in comedy that sort of existed in the last several decades that came to be known as 6 laughs a minute, which translates to, every 10 seconds or so. It's not a hard and fast rule. Of course, it's tension that's being broken. A lot of things in life are that way. It's tension that's being broken. And the longer the ride, it's like a roller coaster. The higher the climb, the better the drop better be, right? Or just like if you listen to DJ music or electronic or EDM, or it's like that. They're all waiting for that drop, right? So it's just like dun dun dun, right? And that escalation in some of these DJ sets can take 20 minutes, and
literally.
Then that drop better be epic, right?
It better be slapping, like it needs to be.
It's got to slap, exactly. And so you've got that kind of thing, right? Where it's and that, or and somebody even said with music in general, and I'm so into music, I never thought of it this simply, which was in music, that's what the verses are. That's the build-up, and the chorus is the hill. That's where people are like really rocking out. It's like, I guess that's a good way of putting it. So when people go into comedy, I think one of the early mistakes they make, and it's fine, make the mistakes early. That's fine. You're not going to skip the mistakes. You're going to have to follow learning to ride a bike. It's realizing that people aren't going to just laugh because of what you're talking about. Like, you guys know what I'm saying. This guy knows what I'm talking about. Like, they're not going to laugh at that. They're going to laugh at a punchline. So I tell people when they write out their set, which I still encourage people to do, whether they write or type, it's fine. But I would put it visually so you could see it. Write an L next to where you think people are going to laugh. Write an L for laugh. Like, put it down where you're expecting it, because otherwise it can become this really long monologue that you just thought everybody was going to think is so funny, because I guess you have to be there. But that's the whole point of stand-up, is they weren't there. You can't end the story by saying, I guess you have to be there. They weren't there. They're people you don't know. So it has to be funny. By definition, they weren't there. Otherwise, it would just be a story you're telling your friends.
We need to humble so many people in like our work meetings and everything, who just start the meeting off. They tell these long stories. We like need to put them up to stand up and be like, did people laugh? Honestly, Kevin, did anyone think that was funny? No. Let's continue. But not to get hung up on that one little tidbit, because what you were saying was so beautiful, but like that was like very fascinating. And now also, like in the last few minutes we have together as like a new parent, how is that informing your comedic style? Like, has that changed things? Because it's such a like big life moment. Has that impacted your work in any way? Or like the person you are? It has.
It's really funny, because I gotta say, there was the very first episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, the pilot in 1999, I think it was. And Jerry Seinfeld is talking about Larry David, saying that if you had to do a science experiment about people who don't change no matter what their environments are, it's Larry David. Like, everything about his life has changed. The money, where he lives, everything, and he's the exact same guy. And I think part of it is having a kid this old. I'm 45 years old. This is about as long as you can push it. I mean, people can have kids older, but one thing that they don't tell you speaking of practical tips, is your parents will be elderly. So sorry, mom and dad, but that's the thing is like they're getting so much older that there are things they want to do so many things. And it's parents in a position which is like, oh gosh, they want to like be able to hold your kid, but they can't quite hold him up completely because that day they're not feeling great. It's like, gosh, I should have done this 10 years ago. So when people are like, oh, age is just a number, I'm like, okay, fine. Then your credit rating is just a number. Your blood pressure, that's just two numbers, right? I mean, numbers matter. Place value matters. So when you have a kid when you're 45, you kind of are who you are. I think Muslims say this too. It's like when you turn 40, that's who you are. And you're judged at the age of 40. I think that it says that in their religion. And I kind of like that. I'm sort of like, I kind of think that's who you are. And I was talking to a friend of mine just on voice memo. I'm a big voice memo person. And I was going back and forth with her about like, I go, I'm a pretty good 45-year-old. I think I was a better 41-year-old. And I was a pretty good 32-year-old, but I wasn't such a great 17-year-old. But I was really good at being 8. And these things evolve. Like you just you're good at like, man, the age of 37, I crushed that, man. Or like 23, I don't know. It's kind of an off year. Like it's just kind of obviously it depends what's going on and whatever's happening in the world. But there's certain, people can navigate the playground really well, and then they get to the office and they're just not that great at it, which is why I tell people when they're selecting colleges or careers, I'm like, think about where you want to work, like the people with whom you want to work and the environment. Like, do you want to work on a factory floor? Do you want to work outside? Do you want to work in an office? Do you want to be in a cube? Do you want to like, what do you want to do? You want to be on a set, like a Hollywood set? Because that's a very different thing. And it's not just the excitement piece of it. It's going to draw different people and different experiences just based on the place and the people. We get so caught up in the work itself. I'm like, the work itself, a lot of the time, we all got the same job. You're answering voicemails, you're answering emails, you're replying to text messages. It's all the same stuff. But the people you do it with and where you do it, that's what changes. Difference. So I don't know with Naveen's being born, how much I've really changed. I'm still pretty petty. I still really I got a message from somebody on Instagram. This really pisses me off. She writes to me,
oh my God, you're pulling it up. I love this.
Oh, right now I'm going to do it because it made me so bad. Because I'm setting, like I have a talk show. You can go watch it at watchrajiv.com. And I've got Deepak Chopra and Utkarsh Ambudkar and Hassan Minhaj and Lily Singh is going to be on her upcoming season. And we got some amazing, amazing people. And I get this message, which is, Raj, I love you, but this feels too much like spam. Can you slow down on DMing me these? I love hearing from you and I don't want to feel like I'm being fed into. I'm like, this is going to ruin my day. So it doesn't matter that Naveen's going to smile at me and he's going to laugh and I'm going to feed him and he's going to burp or whatever. That's going to be my focus.
And you're like,
but isn't it great being a parent? I'm like, it doesn't change you. You are who you are.
Wait, I love this. Okay. I mean, I'm 25. Kids are way far off, but I have so much anxiety about like, I don't want to like not be my own person, et cetera, like the things that make me me. And it's like, well, you'll still be a petty bitch even when you're a kid. And I love that.
And now you said bitch too. I don't feel so bad. So.
Oh my God, of course. I mean, my parents are going to watch this. Every auntie and uncle I know is going to watch this, but it's fine. I used to have a podcast and everyone would be like, it's like, I want to listen to it, blah, 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 whatever. And I'd be like, Amanda, but you cannot send that to everyone. My friend and I are swearing the entire time. We're roasting brown boys. Like, it's just not like good. Yeah. I mean, I'll send it to you off of this. But
I got to hear about all the brown boys, all the F boys.
Oh my gosh. Thank you literally so much. I promised I'd get you out of here at 3:15 on the dot. And I have learned so much from you. I wish this could be like hours longer. You are phenomenal. Everyone needs to watch your talk show to get more of these gems. And I've laughed so much too. So listen, I know there's like, I feel like comedians get that pressure. Like, are you funny when you talk to them? But you just seem like a naturally joyous and exuberant person. And I cannot thank you enough for bringing that to the show. So thank you again.
Oh, wow. That's a really high compliment. That's going to almost balance out this message I got.
It's like a really shit DM that you got. Oh my God. Okay. And on that note, we're going to sign off for this week. All right.
Thank you, Varshini.
Thanks again.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत